the enemy who became his best friend, the secret brotherhood born from rivalry. What if I told you that Zinedine Zidane's most important friendship was born from his most vicious rivalry? That his closest confidant was once his most hated enemy? This is the story of how two men learned that sometimes your greatest opponent is the only person who truly understands your greatest struggles. For 6 years, Paolo Maldini and Zinedine Zidane waged a psychological war that went far beyond football. Every El Clasico, every Champions League encounter, every international match between France and Italy became a personal battle between two perfectionist minds that refused to yield. Then, in one moment of shared vulnerability, enemies became brothers, and football gained its most unlikely friendship. The rivalry began in 1996, when a young Zinedine Zidane first faced Paolo Maldini in a France versus Italy match. On the surface, they seemed like natural enemies. The French artist versus the Italian warrior. The creative genius versus the tactical master. The improviser versus the perfectionist. But it was precisely their similarities that made their rivalry so intense. Both were perfectionists who despised losing. Both carried the weight of their nation's footballing hopes. Both were intelligent enough to anticipate each other's move and stubborn enough to never give up. Playing against Paolo was like playing chess against a computer that could read your mind, Zidane later reflected. He knew what I was going to do before I knew it myself. The feeling was mutual. Maldini would spend hours studying footage of Zidane's matches, analyzing every touch, every movement, every facial expression that might reveal his intentions. What began as professional rivalry soon became personal obsession. Their individual battles overshadowed the team contests, turning every encounter into a psychological duel watched by millions. Euro 2000 final, the first blood. France versus Italy, Rotterdam. Zidane was at his peak, orchestrating France's play with supernatural vision. But Maldini had prepared for 6 months specifically to neutralize him. For 90 minutes, the Italian captain shadowed Zidane like a ghost, anticipating every pass, cutting off every angle, transforming the French maestro into a frustrated artist without a canvas. France won the match, but Zidane felt defeated. For the first time in his career, an opponent had made him feel ordinary. Champions League 2003, the humiliation. Real Madrid versus AC Milan, San Siro. Zidane had joined the Galacticos, carrying the weight of a €75 million price tag and global expectations. But Maldini, now 35 and supposedly past his prime, turned the San Siro into Zidane's personal nightmare. The Italian captain didn't just stop Zidane, he embarrassed him. Every attempt at brilliance was stifled. Every moment of magic was extinguished. Zidane was substituted in the 78th minute, walking off the pitch to applause from Milan fans, who were celebrating not just victory, but the humiliation of football's most expensive player. That night, Zidane couldn't sleep. For the first time in his career, he wondered if he was good enough. By 2001, their rivalry had become toxic for both men. Zidane would spend sleepless nights before matches against Italy, his usual calm replaced by an anxiety he couldn't control. Maldini, meanwhile, had become so obsessed with stopping Zidane that he was neglecting other aspects of his game. Both men were at the peak of their careers, yet both were miserable. The joy they had once found in football was being consumed by their need to defeat each other. I realized that Paolo Maldini was living in my head rent-free, Zidane admitted years later. I was thinking about him more than my own wife. It wasn't healthy. Maldini was experiencing the same psychological burden. Stopping Zidane had become more important to me than playing well for Milan, he confessed. I was defining my success by his failure. That's not football, that's obsession. The breaking point came during the 2001 Champions League semi-final. Real Madrid versus AC Milan, second leg. The score was tied. Tensions were at their highest, and the winner would face Valencia in the final. In the 73rd minute, a routine challenge between Zidane and Maldini turned ugly. Both men went down, but instead of the usual professional acknowledgement of a good tackle, they began arguing. Other players had to separate them. But in that moment of heated confrontation, something unexpected happened. Looking into each other's eyes, both men saw not hatred, but exhaustion. They saw themselves reflected in their enemy, the weight of expectations, the pressure of perfection, the loneliness of being responsible for everything. The argument suddenly stopped. They looked at each other for a long moment, and both understood they were fighting the wrong battle. After the match, which Milan won 1-0, both players sat in their respective dressing rooms, emotionally drained not from the game, but from years of psychological warfare. They realized they had become so focused on destroying each other that they had forgotten why they loved football in the first place. That night, Zidane made a decision that would shock everyone who knew about their rivalry. He called Maldini's hotel room. The conversation lasted 3 hours. What they discussed remained private for years, but both men emerged from that phone call transformed. They had discovered that their greatest enemy was also the only person who truly understood their greatest struggles. What happened next was kept hidden from the football world for over a decade. Zidane and Maldini began a secret friendship, communicating regularly about the pressures of elite football, the burden of expectations, and the loneliness of being constantly judged. They developed their own code for communication, text messages disguised as tactical discussions, phone calls made from private numbers, meetings arranged through intermediaries. The football world continued to see them as rivals, while in reality they had become each other's closest confidants. "Paolo became the brother I never had," Zidane revealed years later. He was the only person who understood what it felt like to carry an entire nation's hopes on your shoulders, to be criticized for not being perfect every single match. Their secret friendship became a support system that helped both players reach even greater heights. When Zidane struggled with the pressure at Real Madrid, Maldini would send anonymous messages of encouragement. When Maldini faced criticism from Italian media, Zidane would call with reminders of why they played the game. During the 2002 World Cup, while Italy crashed out early, Maldini secretly cheered for France, not because he wanted France to win, but because he wanted his friend to succeed. When France lost the final to Brazil on penalties, the first text message Zidane received wasn't from a teammate or family member. It was from Maldini. "You played like a champion. The result doesn't define you. I'm proud to call you my friend." Their friendship remained secret until 2006, when both men were preparing for their final World Cup. Knowing this would be their last chance to face each other on football's biggest stage, they decided to reveal their unlikely bond. The revelation shocked the football world. Media that had spent years documenting their rivalry suddenly had to reconcile the narrative with the reality that these bitter enemies had been best friends for 5 years. "People think rivalry means hatred," Maldini explained in a joint interview. "But the opposite is true. The people who challenge you most are often the ones who help you most. Zinedine made me better by forcing me to be better." The 2006 World Cup final in Berlin became the perfect stage for their friendship's public debut. France versus Italy, Zidane's final match. Maldini's last chance at World Cup glory. Before the match, they met in the tunnel, not as enemies preparing for war, but as friends saying goodbye to an era. They embraced, whispered words of mutual respect, and walked onto the pitch knowing that whatever happened, their friendship would survive the result. The match itself was secondary to the story of two warriors who had learned to fight together against the pressures of the game, rather than against each other. When Zidane was sent off for his infamous headbutt, the first person to console him wasn't a French teammate. It was Maldini, who understood that even legends make human mistakes. When both men transitioned to coaching and executive roles, their friendship evolved into a professional partnership. They regularly consulted each other on tactical decisions, player development, and the psychological challenges of managing elite athletes. Maldini's success as AC Milan's technical director was quietly influenced by insights from Zidane about managing superstar egos. Zidane's Champions League victories with Real Madrid incorporated defensive principles learned from years of studying Maldini's positioning. "We spent so many years trying to destroy each other that we learned everything about how each other thinks," Zidane explained. "When we became friends, that knowledge became a gift instead of a weapon." Their friendship transformed how both men approached rivalry in their coaching careers. Instead of viewing opponents as enemies to be destroyed, they taught their players to see them as challenges to be respected and teachers to be learned from. This philosophy influenced a generation of players who learned that you can compete fiercely while maintaining respect for your opponents. That the goal isn't to humiliate your rivals, but to elevate each other through competition. Today, at 52 and 55 respectively, Zidane and Maldini remain close friends. They vacation together with their families, consult each other on major life decisions, and continue to support each other through the challenges of post-playing careers. Their children have grown up as friends, never knowing a time when their fathers were enemies. To them, Uncle Paolo and Uncle Zinedine have always been part of the extended family. The story of Zidane and Maldini proves that sports rivalry at its highest level isn't about hatred. It's about mutual respect pushed to its limits. Their transformation from enemies to friends demonstrates that the people who challenge us most are often the ones who understand us best. In a world where sporting rivalry is often marketed as personal animosity, their friendship reminds us that competition can be fierce without being destructive, that opponents can push each other to greatness without losing their humanity. They learned that the goal of rivalry isn't to destroy your opponent, but to discover what you're both capable of when pushed beyond your perceived limits. In the end, their greatest victory wasn't over each other. It was together, proving that even the fiercest enemies can become the closest brothers. The enemy who became his best friend taught Zinedine Zidane that sometimes the person standing in your way isn't your obstacle,